Benny, now that the entire internet is aware of exactly how lucrative the fraud activity for Medicaid and Medicare reimbursements are inside of the state of Minnesota, it begs a couple of questions about some recent other curious activities in Minnesota. Obviously, you've seen this report from Nick Shirley, that's gone thermonuclear viral, outlining exactly how the fraud operations work, how utterly shameless the Somali fraud is in Minnesota, stealing and defrauding the American taxpayers. Everybody is in on it. Fake businesses, sham healthcare companies, sham daycares, all of it meant to funnel hundreds of millions, billions of dollars. And the moment you start asking questions about it, you get the police called on you, obviously. The criminals are here to loot and plunder, just like they do in their home country, where the top occupation of Somalia is pirate. They've had a nation for hundreds of years. They have a pristine coastline around the Horn of Africa, and the best occupation they can come up with is pirate. And that's exactly what they're doing here in this country. Welfare rates in Minnesota by households with children. You can see here this line, the black line here and the gray line here are Somali immigrant households. The vast majority of Medicaid, Medicare, welfare payments in Minnesota, of course, go directly to the Somalis. This is the scam. Now, that we know exactly how lucrative this scam is, to the tune of billions of dollars, and the feds are saying that it's $19 billion. That's more than the GDP of Somalia. So they're able to create like a brand new Somalia here using scams in America. You have to start asking some really tough questions. And here's a question that we're going to ask, because our channel covered it more aggressively than any other channel on the entire internet, as far as I know. The killing of Melissa Hortman in Minnesota. What the hell was this exactly? You have this guy showing up in tactical gear, in a tactical mask, a Walter White mask, as far as we can see here. The man who knocks, right? A Walter White mask, and then he murders Melissa Hortman. Now, this is a leader of the Democrats in Minnesota. So that seems strange. Perhaps it's a Republican killing. But of course, the guy had no King's signs in the back of his car. He also was an appointee for Tim Walz. He worked on a Tim Walz appointed board, and his wife worked for Tim Walz, according to congressional records. So this guy is like thick as thieves with Tim Walz. Now, something very strange happened in the case of Vance Bolitar. This is the man who was eventually apprehended and is now charged with the killing of Melissa Hortman. People started to dig into not only his own writings, but Melissa Hortman herself, who was the only Democrat to vote against illegal payments to illegals for Medicaid and Medicare. There was a bill before the House that failed to provide payment to illegal aliens for health care in Minnesota. Melissa Hortman was the only person who voted against it. And Vance Bolitar, the individual who murdered her, is on the record, meaning in a letter that he personally wrote and penned to Kash Patel, saying that it was Tim Walz who put him up to this. That Tim Walz is the person who had him go murder a woman who stood between Tim Walz and Infinity payments for illegals for healthcare in the state. Something that we know now is extremely lucrative. Let's go ahead and read right here. Ask Tim Walz if he knows me and see what he says. If he says he doesn't know me or he's ever met me, look in the files and you'll see that Tim Walz personally appointed me to be his governor's workforce board business representative, and that he's also trying to destroy that info from the public record. Then ask Tim Walz why they kept the shots silent from the media when it first happened. Not a word in the press. Why? Then you need to get their stories figured out so that everybody can be on the same page about what happened. Tim's probably crafting bricks right now because I'm still at large and he knows what I can do, and he knows I know where all the buried skeletons are. So I will be shot on sight. You can bet on that. If you want me to turn myself in, then I need it to be directly to you. He's writing to Kash Patel here. And then I need to be held in a military prison in the Middle East, or at least somewhere on a military ship. They have guns everywhere. They can get anybody, he's saying. What? So has anybody investigated? Has anybody cleared Tim Walz over this? A lot of people are asking these questions on the internet, saying it's a hell of a coincidence. With the fraud being exposed in Tim Walz's Minnesota, only one Democrat voted to stop health care for illegals, one of 67, Melissa Hortman. She was the deciding vote. Then she was killed. And it's almost like she knew it was coming. People are resurfacing this clip of Melissa Hortman sounding terrified, voice cracking, shaking, shivering in Minneapolis after voting to kill healthcare for illegals. Again, Vance Bollinger was appointed. Here's Tim Walz's signature to this board. Melissa Hortman's death directly after voting to not give illegal immigrants money in Minnesota makes a lot more sense after the massive billion-dollar scandal came out. She's the only Democrat in the state to vote no. Remember when Melissa Hortman was murdered for voting against health care in Minnesota? 5 days later, after this vote, her and her husband were murdered by a Tim Walz protege. I'm not sure if he's a Tim Walz protege, but he definitely has a lot of connections to Tim Walz, and in his letter, he blames Tim Walz. So has anybody investigated this? She knew about the multi-billion-dollar welfare scam and tried to stop it. Now she's dead. The fraud being exposed in Minnesota, the only person to vote against illegals having health care is Melissa Hortman. She was the deciding vote. Isn't that interesting? I think it is. I think it absolutely is. So, very strange. Obviously, Elon Musk is saying that Tim Walz deserves to be in prison. Tim wanted me to kill, it says. You see his own handwriting. So I don't know. Has Tim Walz ever been asked a question about this? Tim Walz ordered him to do it. He said Tim Walz ordered him to do it and that he's been used as some sort of plant. His claims are extraordinary. At the very least, in this situation, with so much that we've learned, can we at least ask some questions? Don't we owe it to the deceased? Here's Melissa Hortman, ladies and gentlemen. This is the clip that's going so viral of her sounding just scared as hell, barely able to keep her composure, knowing, did she just know that she voted herself a death sentence? I'm not sure. With so many billions of dollars at stake, I bet she did. Here you go.
I know that people will be hurt by that vote, and we worked very hard to try to get a budget deal that wouldn't include that provision.
DFL Speaker Emerita Melissa Hortman emotional following the House's adjournment from a special session Monday. Hortman was the lone DFL lawmaker to cast a vote to cut Minnesota Care access for undocumented immigrants. It's a move she made with a heavy heart.
I did what leaders do. I stepped up and I got the job done for the people of Minnesota.
The bill was deeply unpopular with members of the DFL caucus. Members have repeatedly expressed frustration that the bill was part of a compromise, one that would ensure the necessary GOP votes to pass the rest of the state budget.
We are tremendously disappointed and gut-wrenched at this decision, at this compromise that compromises our communities that are most vulnerable.
Hortman knows she let down her own caucus members with the vote.
They're right to be mad at me. I think some of them are pretty angry. I think that their job was to make folks who voted for that bill feel like crap, and I think that they succeeded.
Either way, I'm sitting here simply saying justice for Melissa Hortman. Now, a lot of Democrats were trying to frame this as right-wing violence. It's clearly not. This individual is the No Kings killer, worked for Tim Walz, and his wife worked for Tim Walz, was clearly a Democrat, was clearly close to the governor, and then says the governor asked him to kill her. Again, all I'm asking for is, can somebody ask me a few questions about this? Right? Justice for Melissa Hortman.